There was nowhere to go. That is the point of the stack. Overwhelming force and overwhelming speed to paralyze the suspect into surrender. And then it's over. The cuffs click shut. The adrenaline dumps. The fugitive, who has been running for months or years, is suddenly seated in the back of a government vehicle, their world shrinking down to the size of a cage. For the marshals, there is no ticker tape parade. There is just paperwork. The weapon is bagged. The warrant is cleared. The victim's family is notified. It is a moment of quiet satisfaction, a confirmation that the system works. But the celebration is short-lived, because the phone is already ringing. Somewhere else, in another city, another gun has gone off. Another warrant has been printed. Another predator is trying to fade into the shadows. The database is already updating. The gear is being repacked. The engine turns over. For the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, the hunt never truly ends. It just moves to a new address. That sound is supposed to be the end. It's supposed to mean closure, justice, order. But for thousands of people in this country, that sound is the beginning of a nightmare that defies logic. You think you know how the American legal system works. You watch Law & Order. You see the trial, the evidence, the verdict. But that is a fantasy. The reality is a 14-year-old girl shackled in a courtroom for making a joke on MySpace. The reality is a man tried for the same crime 6 separate times by a prosecutor who treated the Constitution like a suggestion. The reality is that if you are standing in a courtroom today, the statistical odds are overwhelmingly against the truth mattering at all. We are taught that the system is blind, that it weighs evidence without bias. But what happens when the people holding the scales are the ones tipping them? What happens when the judge is taking bribes to fill a private prison? What happens when the prosecutor cares more about a winning record than an innocent life? Today, we are not just looking at mistakes. We are looking at a machine that is functioning exactly as it was designed by the corrupt men running it. We are dissecting the failures that don't just bend the law, they shatter it. And we are going to look at the cold, hard numbers that prove this isn't an accident. It's a pattern. Let's go to Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, a place that looks like any other quiet American community. But inside the courtroom of Judge Mark Ciavarella, something horrific was happening. It was a scheme so evil it sounds like fiction. They called it Kids for Cash, but that name is almost too cute. It softens what actually happened. This was human trafficking, sanctioned by the state. Here is the mechanics of the scam. It was simple. It was brutal. 2 judges, Michael Conahan and Mark Ciavarella, conspired to shut down the county's old, run-down public juvenile detention center. Why? To create a vacuum, a market demand. They needed a place to put these delinquent kids. Enter 2 brand-new, private, for-profit detention centers. The builder of these facilities paid the judges $2.8 million. $2.8 million in cash, in wire transfers, in secret. This wasn't a donation. It was a purchase price. And what were they buying? They were buying children. Judge Ciavarella held up his end of the bargain with a terrifying efficiency. He implemented a zero-tolerance policy. Suddenly, the schoolyard scraps, the minor vandalism, the petty theft, things that used to get you a stern talking to or a detention, were treated like felonies. He turned the youth of Luzerne County into inventory to fill the beds of the prisons he was being paid to populate. Take Hillary Transue. She was 14. She made a parody MySpace page mocking her assistant principal. It said he had a big head. It was a joke, a stupid teenage joke. She walked into Ciavarella's courtroom with her mom, thinking she'd get a slap on the wrist. A probation officer even told them, "Don't worry about a lawyer, just tell the truth." That was a trap. The hearing lasted less than 2 minutes. Ciavarella didn't care about her intent. He didn't care about her record. He cared about the empty bed waiting at the facility. He sentenced her to 3 months in a detention center. He ordered her shackled immediately. Her mother stood there, stunned, watching her daughter being dragged away in chains for a MySpace page. This happened over and over and over again. 4,000 times. More than 50% of the children who stood before Ciavarella had no legal representation. That is a statistical anomaly. That is a red flag the size of a billboard. but nobody stopped it. He sent a boy away for driving his parents' car without permission. He locked up a 10-year-old. He destabilized entire families. And the psychological toll? It's unmeasurable. Sandy Fonzo's son, Ed, was one of those kids. A minor drug charge turned into years of cycling in and out of the system. The trauma broke him. At 23 years old, Ed took his own life. Sandy Fonzo screamed at Tia Varela outside the courthouse when the truth finally came out. She screamed, "Do you remember me?" She carried the weight of a son she buried because a judge wanted a new yacht. Tia Varela was eventually caught. He was sentenced to 28 years. Justice served, right? Not quite. His partner, Judge Conahan, got out early. Released to home confinement due to COVID-19, and then, in late 2024, his sentence was commuted by the president. A man who sold children for cash is now a free man. If that doesn't make your blood boil, you aren't paying attention. It proves that in our system, accountability has an expiration date. But judicial corruption is just one head of the hydra. Let's talk about the prosecutors, the people who decide who gets charged. In Winona, Mississippi, there is a man named Curtis Flowers, and there is a prosecutor named Doug Evans. For 23 years, Evans hunted Flowers with an obsession that borders on madness. In 1996, 4 people were murdered in a furniture store. A horrific crime. Evans decided Flowers did it. The evidence was weak. No DNA, no weapon. Just shaky witness testimony and a jailhouse snitch who later admitted he lied to get a deal. But Evans didn't care. He tried Curtis Flowers 6 times. 6 trials. Imagine the psychological torture. You sit in a cell, you go to court, you fight for your life. The jury hangs, or the conviction gets overturned because the prosecutor cheated. And then, you do it again, and again, for 2 decades. Why did the convictions keep getting overturned? Because Doug Evans was breaking the one rule you cannot break. Batson. The Supreme Court says you cannot kick jurors off a case just because of their race. You cannot look at a black citizen and say, "You can't serve here because you're black." But Doug Evans did exactly that, systematically, ruthlessly. In the 6 trials of Curtis Flowers, Evans used his peremptory strikes to remove black jurors at a rate 4.5 times higher than white jurors. He questioned black jurors aggressively, looking for any tiny reason to dismiss them, while letting white jurors with clear biases sit on the panel. He wanted a white jury because he believed a white jury would give him the death penalty. He was engineering the verdict before the opening statements even began. It took the Supreme Court of the United States to finally stop him. In 2019, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a conservative justice, wrote the opinion slamming Evans for his relentless, determined effort to rid the jury of black individuals. The court saw the pattern. They saw the racism. They overturned the conviction. And finally, after 23 years, the charges were dropped. Curtis Flowers walked free. But who gives him those 23 years back? Who pays for the decades spent in a cage at Parchman Prison, waiting to die? Doug Evans retired. He gets a pension. Curtis Flowers gets the trauma. These aren't anecdotes. They are data points in a sea of failure. When we look at the National Registry of Exonerations, the numbers are terrifying. In 2024, they found that in 71% of exoneration cases where we know the person was innocent, official misconduct was a contributing factor. 71%. That means in nearly 3 out of every 4 wrongful convictions, the police, the prosecutors, or the judges broke the rules to get the win. And it gets worse when the stakes are higher. For murder cases, that number jumps to 79%. When a life is on the line, the system is more likely to cheat, not less. And we have to talk about who this hurts the most. The racial disparity is not subtle. It is a chasm. In 2024, 78% of all exonerees were people of color. 60% were black. If you are black in America, you are statistically far more likely to be the victim of official misconduct than if you are white. The Brooklyn District Attorney's Office reviewed 25 wrongful convictions. 24 of them were black or Latinx. In those cases, police forced false confessions, fabricated evidence, and tampered with witnesses. These officers looked at innocent men, and decided their lives didn't matter as much as closing the case. We have to stop looking at these stories as tragic accidents. An accident is when lightning strikes. This is not lightning. This is architecture. This is a system built on plea deals, on racial bias, and on a lack of accountability. When a judge sells kids and gets his sentence commuted, that is a message. When a prosecutor acts with clear racial prejudice for 20 years and faces no punishment, that is a message. The message is that the system protects its own. We need to ask ourselves, do we have a justice system or do we have a legal system? Because those are two very different things. A legal system follows process. A justice system seeks truth. Right now, we are drowning in process, and the truth is the first casualty. I want you to look at these numbers. 2,000 years. That is the combined time the exonerees of 2020 lost in prison. 2 millennia of stolen life. And those are just the ones we know about. The ones who got lucky. The ones who had a lawyer who wouldn't quit. How many Curtis Flowers are sitting in a cell right now, on year 15, on year 20, praying that someone, anyone, will look at the files one more time? This is the reality of American justice. And until we stop accepting the bad apple excuse and start tearing down the barrel, nothing is going to change. It's a nightmare scenario that sounds like fiction, but for one man, it was a terrifying reality. Imagine walking into the execution chamber. You say your final prayers. You eat your last meal. You say goodbye to your family, believing it is the last time you will ever see their faces. You are strapped down. You wait for the darkness to take you, but the darkness doesn't come. Instead, you lie there for hours, poked, prodded, and sliced, only to be unstrapped and sent back to your cell. You survived your own death. But the state wasn't finished. They decided that since the old way didn't work, they were going to try something new. Something that had never, in the history of humanity, been used to execute a prisoner. They were going to turn you into a test subject. This is the harrowing, true story of Kenneth Eugene Smith, the man the state of Alabama had to kill twice. To understand how we reached this grim medical frontier, we have to rewind to a rainy spring day in 1988.